Hello, folks. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, your Christian whistleblower. Welcome to the Gospel Truth channel. It is my pleasure to have with us tonight Dr. Tammi Balashevsky. She is a very well-rounded individual, a very well-educated individual, a radio professional herself. Let me give you just a short rendering of her many credentials. She's an ordained minister, holds a couple of PhDs. She's an author, an artist, an art for healing instructor, a Mandela facilitator, certified hypnotherapist, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts, accomplished writer and author, has her own radio show, and we could go on, but I'd rather just talk to Dr. Tammi. Welcome to the channel. How are you?
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm fantastic. I'm so happy to be with you.
It's a real pleasure for me, and I'm sure a real pleasure for our audience as well. And Tammi, reading your story and reading through the information you sent me, I'm struck by the fact that we really need to understand and realize that one day we can be seemingly on top of the world, and then the next day we can be seemingly at the bottom of the bottom. And then the good news is the next day we can be back up on top again. Tell us a little bit about your story and how I know there was 2 books born out of it, a radio show born out of it. Just help us get to know you a little bit better.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for asking. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, and I had an intention very early on that I was going to be very successful, rich, and my intention at 7 years old was to marry somebody famous.
Did you have any idea if you wanted to be a movie star or a writer or a singer or just successful?
I knew I wanted to have wealth, and my real goal was to be married to an actor, a celebrity.
Really?
I didn't necessarily, and at 7 years old, my mom asked me what I was going to do when I grew up, and I said, be a princess. And she said, no, you have to be born into royalty. So my second choice was to marry a celebrity. And she kind of said, yeah, okay, well, maybe you better come up with plan C now. But I was pretty convinced that I could make this happen. And 20 years later, I was right on track with those very youthful intentions of mine.
Were you married to a celebrity?
No, I was engaged, and we were making wedding plans. And I found every day that when I was to speak with the wedding coordinator, I would feel really sick. And I don't know about you, Jeffrey, but I really believe our bodies can inform us if something's off.
Tammi, that's amazing. 7 years old, putting out this intention, I'm going to marry a celebrity, I'm going to marry an actor. And 20 years later, here you are engaged to a celebrity, engaged to an actor. Doesn't that just really give us an idea of the true power of our intention, especially if we really, truly, deeply feel it and manifest it on a continual basis?
Yeah, and I think we all are very powerful with our intentions if we believe that we are worthy of them. And I did. I believed I could manifest this, and I did. But the interesting thing was, now that I look back in retrospect, my intention was really born of ego. And at 7 years old, that's really all you have, that sense of I, me, mine, trying to cultivate our own identity.
Good point.
Most of us go into our teenage years and maybe 20s and sometimes beyond from that state of separation and ego. So I created this life based out of ego, and I manifested everything I thought that I wanted, but it didn't fulfill me in the way that I thought that it would. So,
interesting. So how do you think we should deal with young people like your mother, hearing you make those manifestations? If there's parents out there that are in a similar situation with young people, how can we help, or should we even try to help, lead, guide, direct, maybe perhaps broaden a child that has such a strong, powerful statement of intention and such laser focus?
Well, I think that's a brilliant question. It's a beautiful question. And I think, yes, it is important to try to instill those beliefs and understandings and teachings that's wonderful to have your goals and desires, but also to keep your eye on the bigger picture, which is not just to get and to consume and be indulgent with our goals and intentions, but also to give and share and cooperate with the deeper belief, the deeper knowing that in truth, we are all connected. We're all one. So what we do unto others, we really are doing to ourselves because we are all connected.
Yeah,
So
what a fine line though to you don't want to break a childhood intention and a belief and intention. But yet again, I'm thinking maybe if your mother had asked you questions like, okay, honey, I know that you think you're going to marry an actor. Do you know why you want to marry an actor?
wow.
What does that look like to you? What would that be like for you?
And that's a fantastic question. And I think that's, again, very astute of you to ask those open-ended questions. Because at that time, I don't think I knew why I wanted what I wanted. And I actually write about this in my book. What is it you want? It's Christmas. You can have whatever you want. Write that down. Now get beneath that. Why do you want what you want? And when we start asking ourselves those open-ended questions, or our children or others, then we are all in this position where we can go deeper into our own wisdom and knowing and answer these questions from that place of a greater connection and alignment. And it can be often quite profound what bubbles up from that place.
Oh, I can imagine. I'm a huge believer and a huge proponent in helping people find what I call their great basic purpose. Find out who you are, what drives you, what pushes you, what motivates you. And often, Dr. Tammi, I'll ask people to go back to when they were a child and think of what they wanted. And when I grow up, I'm going to be a blank. And many times that's a clue to our great basic purpose. But I've never really thought of it from your point of view that we could be manifesting just out of ego. How do you think that things might have worked out? Now, you're great. You've come through it in a great place. But how do you think things might have been different if someone had been there to help you maybe understand more of why you wanted to manifest that and what some of the deeper, second, third, fourth, fifth level or fifth layer intentions and thoughts were behind that?
Well, and again, that's a fantastic question. I really think the most important thing we can do for ourselves, for our children, and for each other is to help us understand our innate value and worthiness despite our goals or accomplishments, that we know our value from our beingness, not just our doingness. And at 7 years old, my dad didn't pay a lot of attention to me. And I think on some level, as I look back, I thought, well, if I was famous, if I was with someone famous, then my dad might finally throw me a bone or love me, or maybe then I would have value and worth. So to have that understanding that our value and worth comes from something much deeper than our accomplishments and what we do in the world and our credentials and fame and fortune or whatever, that our value comes from that essence of beingness, that can really help us relax more fully into our authentic shape. And from creating in that place and tending in that place, we can start to really manifest miracles that are worthy of our life force.
That's a great point. And so before you were so rudely interrupted, you were 27-ish. You had manifested this life. I'm going to marry a celebrity. But you were starting to feel like, you said you were starting to feel some apprehension when you were talking to the wedding coordinator?
Yeah, I would feel kind of like actually really sick. But to go back, the first year, it was everything that I thought that I wanted. The man was brilliant, a little tortured. I love that combination. That was my thing. And I really did adore him. It was love at first sight from my perspective. The first year was a lot of fun. I was on the red carpets. I was flying first class. I was doing everything that I thought I wanted to do. There was still an underpinning of discomfort, that it wasn't quite as satisfying as I thought it would be.
It wasn't as easy being a princess as you thought?
Something was missing.
Okay.
Something was missing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The second year was not good. The third year was horrible. In that first year, we had decided we would get married the next spring. And my, you might find this interesting, priest said, well, I was Catholic at the time, said you can't get married in a Catholic church unless he has his first and second marriage annulled. So he would have to do a lot of paperwork in order for us to get married. And the priest was a friend of mine, and I really wanted it to look this particular way. So it took him a while to do the paperwork. And by the time it was complete, there were a lot of cracks in the foundation. and a lot of huge red flags. It was an indication to me that perhaps this wasn't exactly the path that was for my highest good.
Now, what happened, if you can share things that are so personal, but I think it might help people. What was it that made you identify those red flags and get out your green spray paint and paint the red flags green?
Well, he had some addiction problems, and I hadn't been around anyone with these types of issues before. Mm-hmm. And if I had known about such things, or Al-Anon, it would have probably saved me a lot of pain and heartache. And it was very, very confusing for me. I was really young, and I was in my 20s, and I was probably in over my head a little bit in regards to what was going on. And I thought that I could fix it. I thought that I'm a caretaker, I'm a people pleaser. I didn't know that at the time, but I thought I can fix this. I've been able to accomplish a lot of goals and intentions. I can heal this man up. I can fix this, and I'm going to be his savior. And when I am, he'll finally love me, and I'll be worthy of love, and we'll live happily ever after. And I think it's a modern myth that many women, and maybe even men, buy into. I will rescue you. You will love me forever because of that, and we will go on to live this heaven on earth life. But yeah, between the addiction and the affairs, and the more I prayed for help and to make it better, the worse it got, which made me feel perhaps I was unworthy, that God didn't hear me or love me enough to answer my prayers. So finally, things got so bad that I had to change my prayer, because I really did get to the point where I thought, I'm not going to survive this much longer unless something changes. So instead of telling God what I wanted, and please help me with it, I asked him what he wanted from me. I just surrendered. I just gave up. And so almost as soon as I did, he met another woman, and basically kind of just left me behind and carried on this relationship. And in fact, my priest performed their wedding ceremony with the annulments he had done for me, just replaced our names. And I'm like watching this like it's a really bad movie.
How did that hurt you when that happened, when your priest did that?
It devastated me. Brought me to my knees. Everyone was gone. My therapist, my priest, my family didn't really want to talk to me because I was a whining, bratty Eeyore for so long I couldn't take it anymore. So I was really just left alone. The church was gone. My priest was gone. It was just me. And that was when I started really having some authentic conversations with spirit, source, creator.
I find it interesting, Tammi, that for a long time you were talking at God and telling God what you wanted, and things were going a certain direction. But when you actually stopped and started listening to the divine, that's when things happened. But it looked like from the outside world that everything fell apart. But knowing your story, and I just got chills thinking about this, sometimes what we think is rejection is really protection. And sometimes what we think is a horrible crash and burn is really just wiping the slate clean, resetting, and really saving us from a world of hurt. Can you imagine, as much as you were hurting, what would have happened if you had gone through and the wedding had been consummated? It could have been so much worse.
So much worse. In fact, I really don't think I would have survived it. I do think it was protection. And my ego was devastated, but my soul celebrated. And it was sort of like I had this castle built on sand. And the foundation wasn't there. The foundation was cracked, and it was unsolid, and everything just fell. And I was given this wonderful blessing and opportunity, as painful as it was, to build my life on a rock solid foundation where my connection to God was now in order and in place. And it took a while to really cultivate that foundation. But once I did, and I started rebuilding my dream house, it's now solid. It's now stable. The wind isn't going to blow it away. The hurricane isn't going to rip it up and, destroy it. Like you said in the beginning of the show, it's interesting how we can think we have everything, it can be destroyed, and we can rebuild it. And this time it was rebuilt solid and strong and stable, with that connection with source being my absolute number one priority.
Interesting. I had an experience that's not too dissimilar to what you're talking about. There was not really anybody famous involved in it, but I'd been a minister for about 20 years, had a growing, thriving ministry, was doing very, very well, and all of a sudden, the lady that I was married to for 16 years decided she didn't want to be married anymore. So I was just devastated, and one of my buddies got blindsided about the same time. So we decided, if we're going to be miserable, let's be miserable in Hawaii. So I went out to Hawaii, and I was waiting for him to get there, and there was still a chance that maybe she was going to come around and stay. And then she called me up and said no, she wasn't. And there I was in Hawaii by myself, and I'm sitting in this condo, and I come to myself, there's several beer bottles around the floor that I had consumed, several cigar stogies that had been smoked. And there was even a time where I thought, I was up about the 18th floor, I should just go jump off of this thing and end it all. And I sat there, and I came to this one point, and I just looked around, and I thought about the divine, and I thought about my situation. And I remember the words of Job. And Job said, even if you slay me, I'm still going to trust you. And I actually said those words. I came to that point, and then I went out on the deck thinking, okay, I'll clear my mind. And I went out there, and there was this real heavy mesh that was screwed in to keep like the birds from coming in. So I couldn't have jumped off even if I want. But did you have one of those, though he slays me yet will I trust him moments?
It's interesting that you bring that up. I have had that conversation a lot. When God asked me, do you trust me? And initially my response was no.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. But as we continued on this path, he would ask me again, do you trust me? And it was like, maybe. And then it became yes with a question mark. And it was almost like I heard him say, I can't wait until you can say yes with an exclamation point. And as I continued to move forward, I now trust God. Absolutely.
How long did it take, Tammi?
And again, it was a journey. It wasn't easy. And it's so interesting in retrospect. The one day where I was supposed to be calling the wedding coordinator, I was picking up the phone, and I was having these really bad stomach cramps. And I had been actually suicidal. So this isn't necessarily the way you want to approach your wedding day, or at least I didn't. The only thing that was really kind of fun about it was a possibility of this fun wedding and the photographers and being on People Magazine and Inside Edition, etc. But the marriage was not something I was looking forward to. And that's not what I wanted for myself. I never had the dream of having a big white wedding. I wanted my spiritual partner. So I don't know if it was even a prayer. It was just this question that I posed out loud. God, why can't I just marry this man and be happy? Because everybody says I'm so lucky, and I know on some level that I am, but I feel so sad. And what I heard so clearly, and this is the first time this ever happened to me, Jeffrey, I heard God say, if you marry him, you will miss the man I have sanctified for you.
Wow.
I've never used that word before. I don't even remember ever hearing that word before. I actually went to a dictionary and looked up the word sanctified, and it said to be blessed by God. It had never occurred to me before that moment. And again, I was asking an open-ended question. And when we do, the answers can show up or bubble up. And so it occurred to me that there maybe was a man that was blessed by God for me. And this was not the one. And I realized I couldn't marry him and divorce him. I had to trust. I had to trust God. And that was when I said, okay, I give up. I surrender. You tell me, you show me, because obviously me doing things my way isn't working very well.
Right, right. And one of the other definitions of sanctify is to set aside for use in worship, or to set aside for holy use. So
Wow.
God the divine had a higher plan for you. And so things are in shambles, so to speak. This dream that you've been manifesting for 20 years is gone. Mm-hmm. What happens next?
Well, I'm now not just with a famous guy and wealthy and sad. I'm broke and alone and sad. Again, nobody would return my phone calls. Nobody wanted to speak with me. In fact, this guy didn't even break up with me. He set up an appointment with the therapist, a couples appointment, and I went, and he wasn't there. And she was the one that told me he was never coming back. So he didn't actually ever have the conversation with me.
Oh my.
with me for him. And I didn't really know what was going on except for the media. It was in the media. And I just was left alone praying a lot. And God basically just said, just keep taking each next step. Because I really at one point considered, I don't need to be on this planet. I've screwed it up. I was given this great opportunity and I blew it. And I just kept saying, I want to come home. I want to come home. I want to come home. And what I got so clearly was, if I could find my way out of this type of pain, someday I was going to be able to be a touchstone or a helper or a light worker to help people out of this kind of pain. And it had never occurred to me before that moment that I would be able to contribute that way. My life had again been about ego and about my facade and my false mask and look at me and trying to prove that I was worthy of love from the outside in. It never works. So in this moment, I had this awareness that someday I might be able to alleviate pain and provide clarity for people that were in the kind of pain I was in. So I decided to commit to being human. And the very next day, my neighbor had mentioned a school that she was going to. It was about the body, mind, spirit connection. And then that was something that interested me. And I didn't know why, but it was a little bit of a spark inside of me. It had been a while since I had that kind of, that sounds interesting. That sounds
right.
exciting. So I ended up checking out the school and I enrolled and I became a massage therapist. So I went from red carpets and first class and private jets to going to massage school and schlepping around a massage table and doing massage. And again, my ego was devastated and my soul celebrated. It really put me on the path of healing. And the cool thing about massage school for me was I was learning a trade, but it was also receiving a lot of work. And then I went on to study cranial sacral and polarity balancing. So as I was learning, I was also receiving healing. So it was a really, it was wonderful how God set this all up for me. And after that, amazing. I studied hypnotherapy, and then I studied psychology, and then spiritual psychology, and then metaphysics. And it was like God was leaving breadcrumbs. And I was just taking each breadcrumb one step at a time, one step at a time. And as I meditated, I saw this image of just a very thick fog, and I couldn't see very far in front of me. But I could look down, and I could see each next step, each next stepping stone. And I could see my feet, and I could put my foot on that stepping stone. And it was like I was holding God's hand. And as long as I held God's hand and just looked down and saw each next step, I felt that I was going to be guided. And in fact, I was. 5 years later, the fog had completely lifted. And I was on solid ground within myself, in a very solid relationship with my inner child and source. And that was when I met the man that God sanctified.
What had happened to your ego in that time?
Oh, it didn't like it. This is not what I thought I was signing up for. But again, creating from that separation, that false mask and unworthiness, and trying to prove to others that I'm something special, trying to earn love. And again, that was a perpetuation of my childhood, trying to earn my father's affection or love, trying to prove to him I was worthy of love, instead of just relaxing and knowing that I was incredibly valuable and worthy of God's love, which is our true Father.
And you know what strikes me, Dr. Tammi, is that it seems like when religion and when church failed you, that's when you really reached out to God and God stepped in. And God and the divine can be very separate from those things sometimes.
It was in my experience. It really was. I was very disillusioned by my relationship with the church. And when I was speaking to my priest and I said, I can't believe he's going to give you, my ex-fiance is going to give you a couple of crumbs and you're going to go that way, where I've been giving you a whole cake. I was singing in the choir. I was there every weekend. And he ended up being kind of, I think, ushered out of a church in Santa Monica and ended up in a church in South Central LA. And I was the only white girl in the choir, and I didn't care. I was just celebrating my connection to God. And I was very happy. But then when he got the call from my ex-fiance and said, oh, I'm going to New York with him and his new fiance, and I'm probably going to perform their wedding ceremony, I was just like, I was in shock. And he thought this was something I was supposed to be happy for him about. And I was just absolutely stunned. I said, he can give you a couple of crumbs and I can give you a whole cake and you're going to take his crumbs. And he goes, well, there are certain advantages to being friends with this man. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm done with the church. But the church can often be, and the people in the higher levels of the church can be kind of self-serving in that it's about the church. It's an organism. It can be, in my experience, a little bit like a dysfunctional family. And I was disposable. I wasn't bringing that much to the table in the overall scheme of things. My heart and soul didn't really bring the same contribution as the money and the fame.
Right, right. And it's interesting, a corollary in my situation. I was a pretty successful evangelist. I was one of the guys that was doing well, and everybody wanted me to write them letters of recommendation and call up pastors for them and have them come along with me. And I was everybody's buddy when I was on top, but all of a sudden when my wife left, and in my denomination, if you get divorced, you have to be on the sidelines for 3 years. I went from being somebody that everybody wanted to talk to where I couldn't, like you, couldn't get a phone call returned. And to this day, there's only 2 guys, and they're both still pastors. I'm not a pastor anymore, but if you're in Spokane, Washington, and you need a real man of God, Brian Larson, Church of God, Seventh Day. If you're in, I think he's in Bothell, Washington, Tom O'Haver is with the Messianic Church. I don't agree with any of them doctrinally, but they are 2 real men of God. I mean, they stuck by me. Out of the hundreds of people I knew, there was 2 people that stuck by me. So, you find out who your friends are and you find out who your God is when you go through these things sometimes. So, Tammi, if somebody's at the bottom right now, what do you recommend that they do?
And it may not seem to be the case. This may not seem to be true, but it really is a blessing. The dark night of the soul is when we are on our knees. And for me, and what I would say to anybody listening that's in that place, this is an opportunity for you to open your heart fully. Allow your heart to break open and start cultivating that very personal relationship with the energy that created you, that energy that created you with love and affection and adoration. And just like what Jeffrey was saying in the beginning, sometimes it's protection. This isn't the path that you're supposed to be going down for your highest good and the highest good of all concerned. This can be a course correction. So pray, and even more importantly, meditate. Prayer is talking to God, meditating is listening to God.
That's a huge difference. Say that again, please.
Prayer is talking to God, which is important, but even more important is meditating, which is listening.
I just wanted to hear my subscribers hear somebody else say that, because they hear that come out of my mouth so often.
Well, and the vision that came to mind, I'm a very visual person. I'm an artist and I see things. And it's like picking up the phone. I saw somebody picking up the phone and calling God and then talking, and then hanging up.
Yes.
That's before the real gift. That's before the real gold. That's before the real opportunity to listen to wisdom. And we all have that opportunity to tap into that wisdom and hear God's voice, but it whispers. And we need to silence our monkey mind. We need to silence the chattering and the yammering and the fear-based thoughts and drop into our heart and be still and be quiet and ask the questions you want the answers to. And if you're patient, you're going to start to hear the whisperings of your soul and the source. And that, oh my gosh, thank goodness everything happened that happened so I could cultivate that friendship and relationship, because now
isn't that amazing?
That is my compass and touchstone guiding light. And I wouldn't want to live without it. Yeah. I don't want to be on this planet without it.
Tammi, something just popped into my mind. I'm thinking about, we talk about hitting rock bottom, and hitting rock bottom is terrible. Hitting rock bottom is awful. Hitting rock bottom is the worst that there could be. But then I start thinking about the Christ. And he said, one person builds their foundation on the sand, and the winds come, the life comes, and it blows, and whatever you build on it falls over. But another person builds their house on a rock. And what's built on rock stands firm no matter what happens. So sometimes God has to let things blow the divine has to let things blow all your sand away until you get to rock bottom. Rock bottom is not a blessing. rock bottom is not a curse. It's just the divine has had to take a long time to get all that sand that you wanted to build on out of your way. Thank God you're at rock bottom. Thank the divine you're at rock bottom. Thank source you're at rock bottom, because now you got something firm to build on.
Beautiful. So true.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It's a miracle. It's a blessing. And it's the journey of the hero.
Yeah.
It's the journey of the hero. In the beginning, we're trying to create of our own accord and our own ego. And eventually we're disillusioned. Eventually the rug's pulled out from under us. Eventually we're on our knees. This happens to people. It happens maybe multiple times in one person's life. But then we can start having that conversation with God. We can start to partner with spirit. And then we can start creating more from that connected, aligned place. And I say we can create from ego or igo. We can create from edging God out, or we can create from inviting God only. And for me, for sure, inviting God only is really the way to go. That's where the joy is, the miracles, the God winks, the synchronicity, the support, the peace, the grace. It's heaven on earth.
It is. So what were the differences from when you're 7 years old, wanting to be a princess, wanting to marry a famous person, and then you're at rock bottom and you're starting to put yourself back together? What was your intention like then versus what it was when you were 7 years old?
Another great question. Well, at 7 years old, I was looking to be the princess to a prince. After I was brought to my knees, and, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, in Jerry Maguire, where he says, "You complete me." It's very romantic. I was looking for that one to complete me.
What a great lie. That's the worst lie ever. No one will ever complete you. I used to do a lot of preaching, and I remember a guy named Josh McDowell. I don't agree with much of his theology, but I remember when I was on the same program he was on, and he said, if you want to attract a 10, you have to be a 10. If you want to be a complete person, if you don't, no one completes you. You have to be complete yourself. And I mean, Tom Cruise was wrong.
He was wrong, but it seems we all buy into it.
Oh, it's so romantic. We love it. Girls cry and men are like, oh yeah, I got to learn to do that. And
well, if you look at the fairy tales, I loved fairy tales. I was a sucker for a good fairy tale up into my 20s. I loved Cinderella.
Right up till you were about 27, by my estimation.
I thought he was my prince.
Well, he was riding in on a white horse, had a beautiful golden carriage, had a beautiful castle. It was all there, Dr. Tammi.
And I gave up my power, and I got in that gilded cage, and I became a paper doll.
Even a gilded cage is still a cage, right? It
was still a cage. And I kept saying to the therapist, this doesn't feel like my life. It doesn't feel like my life. And it was because it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So again, my intention after I got out of that relationship and started to stabilize, I didn't want to find someone to complete me after that. That was a dreadful disaster. I wanted to become whole. I wanted to become a whole person. And I love Lao Tzu's quote, "Be really whole and all things will come to you." I wanted to heal up. I wanted to get solid in my connection with God. I wanted to heal up my inner child and stop looking for a man to make her feel good about herself. I wanted to start living from the inside out. And I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but I knew this was my new path.
Can I share something with you real quick? I don't mean to interrupt, but I was in the same place. And, my wife left me. Wife of 16 years left me. I'd never been alone. So over the next 18 months, I was married and annulled 2 more times in 18 months.
Wow.
And dated a bunch of quote unquote crazy women, just drama, nutso crazy. And I finally sat down one day and I'm talking about all these crazy women. I was talking to somebody, oh, she was crazy. She was crazy. She was crazy. And then I sat there after they left and I was thinking to myself, what was the common denominator in all of those relationships? And it was me. So what I had to do, Dr. Tammi, was go 18 months cold turkey. I didn't talk to a woman, didn't look at a woman, didn't have lunch with a woman. I went 18 months cold turkey just to get myself clean and sober, as I call it. And that really turned my life around. Now, I don't know if that's a dude thing, but I just thought I would share it.
No, I mean, that's my story as well. I didn't go 18 months, but it was more like 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was like, I can't keep doing this because
I had it twice as bad as you did, so it was okay.
It took some time. So no, I wrote down a list of all the guys I'd gone out with and things that they had in common. And, you know, I had to look at that and realize that that was me too. We don't attract what we want. We attract what we are.
You attract people at your same level of dysfunction.
Water finds its own level, and like attracts like. So for a while I was saying, well, all men are like A, B, C, D. But then I realized I was attracting these men. So yeah. I started looking around at different.
Isn't that something, Dr. Tammi? All women are this. All men are this. No. All women that you're attracting or all men that you're attracting are like this. Because why? You're like that.
Yeah.
Ouch, that's hard.
I wanted to dance with.
Ooh, it's hard, but you got to come to that realization.
Yeah. So I had to really step back like you did, Jeffrey, and do my healing work. You know, another question I asked God, why can't I attract a man who loves, adores, cherishes me, understands me? Because you don't love, adore, cherish, and understand yourself. I was like,
ooh.
Wubba. And it was true.
Wow.
So that became my priority intention. I'm going to learn to like myself, love myself, adore myself, cherish myself, understand myself, and respect myself.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Christianity, whether it be Roman Catholicism like you are in or Roman Protestantism like I was in, teaches that we're born with original sin, that we're bad, we're flawed, we're ugly. Whereas the Christ said that we're born with the spirit of divinity within. How do you think it's possible that training you had from Catholicism, that you were born with original sin, made you to a place where, or at least contributed to you not being able to love, honor, and cherish yourself?
I do think so. You know, as a young girl, going to catechism and having to go profess my sins at 6 years old, that, you know, why am I not worthy? You know, what have I done wrong? And focusing on what's wrong and bad. And I'm not worthy of receiving you. Forgive me, Father, I have sinned. I do think that did something to me on in a foundational way. And especially in combination with the fact that my father didn't want daughters. I was the firstborn and I was a daughter, and I was a huge disappointment to him. And it was no secret. It's still no secret. He ended up having 5 daughters and he's still mad. So I had to do a lot of work to come back to what you're talking about, realizing that I'm not guilty. I'm not unworthy. I'm not a mistake. I am, in fact, the child in whom God is well pleased. I am the light and apple of his eye. And to really, I mean, that was a revelation for me, to be able to sit with that and relax into that and receive that. That was the healing work that needed to happen in order for me to attract the man that God has sanctified for me. I can't attract someone who adores me unless I adore myself and can receive the adoration of my Creator.
Right. Now, when that man did show up on the scene, was it like love at first sight again?
It was for me. I think it was for him as well. It was like, and I had done this. It was so funny because after my 9-month man fast, I was like, okay, God, where's my husband? I feel like I like myself. I love myself. I respect myself. I cherish myself. I understand myself. Where is it? And God said, write it down. Write down an ideal scene. Who is this man? What are these qualities? And I was like, oh no, because then he might show up. And I realized I still had a little bit of fear to work with.
Right.
Before I was really ready to claim him. So about a week later, I sat down and I did an ideal scene. I just took a blank piece of paper, put a heart in the center and wrote, I am, and then did spokes off the heart all over it and wrote all the qualities and characteristics and experiences that I would have with this guy. He was masculine, but able to speak of his emotions. He had a great work ethic and ambitious. He respected and loved his mother. And I did some trick ones too. He knew to walk on the outside of the street because most young men don't know that. So it was like 100 qualities. And I looked at this list and I went, God, men aren't like this. And I heard this voice again that I know now to be my best friend. It only takes one. If they were all like this, you'd be confused about the one that I have sanctified for you. So a week after I had done this ideal scene, I was hired to do a trade show in Las Vegas. And I had almost turned it down because I wasn't getting my day rate.
Are you going to tell me you met the one that God sanctified for you in Sin City?
I did.
That's awesome.
And we're actually building a second home there right now. I can't believe it. I left the City of Angels to go back to Sin City for my second home.
I love Vegas. I spent a lot of time in Vegas, and for some reason, I'm not a gambler, but I just really have an affinity for Las Vegas.
Vegas was always really, really good to me. I made a lot of money there, made a lot of friends there. We had a royal flush the last day I lived there. Vegas was always really good to me. LA kind of beat me up, but I feel like that's where I got my
LA is a hard, hard town.
It was harsh for me. It was very harsh. So my husband actually lived and lives in Boise, Idaho. So I visited, I worked in Vegas and met with him. And then eventually he came to visit me in Los Angeles. And after about 6 months of dating, he proposed to me. And I said, yes. And he goes, you want to get married? I said, yes. He goes, do you want to move to Idaho? And I said, no. How is this going to work? So he was so lovely. He's like, well, you know what? Keep your condo, go back and forth as much as you want. And so that's what I did for 10 years. I ended up.
Oh, very nice.
And I have fallen madly in love with Idaho. It is the gem state. I live in Treasure Valley. It's exquisite. I've cultivated many relationships with horses and amazing humans. And again, God had a different idea for me in my life than I had for myself. And I'm so glad that I opened my heart to hear it, because I'm far more fulfilled and happy.
Well, people don't understand Boise. They think of Idaho, it's so dry and arid, but they don't realize that there's a beautiful, fertile valley that Boise sits in. That's one of the most productive valleys in the entire country agriculturally, and it's really gorgeous.
It is. It's gorgeous. This weekend for my birthday, I was up in the mountains riding horses with my family. And, it's a forest, there's mountains, there's plains. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. And it's the closest to God I've ever felt. And it's a blessing and it's a miracle. And I'm again, grateful for that rock bottom. I'm grateful that I listened to the wisdom of my heart and allowed it to usher me in a different, on a different path than what I thought I wanted for myself. Yeah. I'm far more fulfilled. Yeah. And,
can I break in and share something with you on that? And it's almost a little bit of a commercial, because I work with people, and what I try to do is help them get what I call their analytical mind back healthy and in order, and get gaps out of it so they can understand and trust their blink, their personal intuition. You were 7 years old, you were running on what you thought was right, and you were manifesting something that you wanted, but it wasn't right for you, because your mind wasn't where it needed to be, is what I'm suggesting. After you had this whole period of adjustment, then you were able to get to the place where your analytical mind was working and functioning perfectly in alignment with the Christ. And, you say that, the first guy you met, love at first sight. Well, it probably really wasn't love at first sight, but it's what your mind had been building for you. And it was exactly what you wanted. So it said, oh, love at first sight. Second time, your mind was in alignment with the Christ. It was in alignment with the things that really were important. And maybe you were a little bit shy of this love at first sight, but you saw it, and your analytical mind said, bam, that's what you want. That's what you need. So it really was love at first sight, even though love really takes time to cultivate and develop, but your mind knew that was the person for you. So this is why I try to share with my people all the time. Let's work together. Let's get your analytical mind off the lower mind, get it onto the higher mind, the mind of Christ, so you can find yourself not manifesting into things that aren't good for you, but manifesting into your great basic purpose and the center of the will of the Christ for you.
Yeah, that's so beautifully put. And as I'm listening to you, what I'm also recalling is when I was 4 and 5 years old, when I was 6 years old, before 7, my joy came from sitting outside in nature, drawing pictures of horses. In nature and drawing pictures of horses. And it was a quiet, sweet, safe, magical life. Something happened around 7 or 8 where I started, I guess, paying attention to what was around me and what could I do to impress my father or get his love.
Was it too many Disney movies, possibly?
I think that might have contributed to it. Reading those fairy tales, I think that might have had something to do with it as well. That and the church, and a man is more important than a woman.
Oh, we don't need
a lot of that.
Yeah,
a lot of that. A woman can't be a priest. The man has the power. So if you want to have any value in this culture, you need to be attached to a powerful man. Before I started maybe buying into that, and again, I didn't do that consciously. It just was being, innately programmed. I feel like I've come back full circle to that really younger part of myself that believes in magic, that loves horses, that believes in love in a quiet, softer way. It's not the big, bold, blow it out, I'm famous, I'm rich, look at me. And it's also the other quality that is so prevalent in this, in either of these situations. With the first time I fell in love at first sight, there was a fear-based energy. Like I wanted to grab at it. I wanted to hold on to it. And there was this anxiety about it. When I fell in love with my husband, Steve, there was no fear. There was no grabbiness.
There was peace, wasn't there?
Peace. And I loved him with an open hand. And it was okay if he wasn't the one, because I trusted God so much. It's like, it's not this guy, it's the guy behind him, or the guy behind him, or the guy behind him.
No, Tammi, that had so much to do with how you felt about you. You were in love with you at that point. You accepted you. You adored yourself. You knew your own worth. So, hey, this guy's great. But if not, hey, his loss.
Yeah.
Who's next?
I was so comfortable in my skin and so celebrating myself and my connection to God, loving my creativity, trusting my intuition. I was very fulfilled. I didn't need a man to complete me or fulfill me at that point. I was dancing in my own life.
There you go.
I'm now looking for my partner to dance and celebrate and expand this energy of light and love and God on earth. Heaven.
Interesting. How long have you been married?
14 and a half years.
Okay, so let me ask you a tough question. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that this may have happened sometime along in 14 years. You're with the person that you know that you're supposed to be with. You're madly in love. You know this is the person that God has put you together with. But all of a sudden, something happens where there's a disagreement or things don't go perfect one day. What do you do when you're in the perfect relationship and all of a sudden, oh, there's some things we need to work on? How do you deal with that?
And that's a great question. This is something I talk about a lot in my book and in conversations and in counseling, is really about taking care of the inner child. Because often when something comes up, like he looks at me wrong, or he doesn't do what I want him to do, and I get all like twisted and contorted and unhappy, I now immediately go to my inner child and go, how are you? And she'll say, well, like, I'm upset, I'm mad, I'm sad. And I have that conversation with my inner child. And because I can be responsible for that, I don't make him responsible for taking care of her feelings, of her needs. There was one funny story years ago. We went out to dinner and we had a couple cocktails and we went to the movies, and I was so excited that Bewitched was on and I wanted to see Bewitched. And he didn't like Nicole Kidman. He's like, no, I don't want to see this. Let's go. And I was like, what? I couldn't have been more excited to see a movie ever. My inner child was just like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So he's like, no, we're leaving. So we went and got in the car and came home. And I was like, oh, I was so mad. My arms are crossed. I'm like, I'm never going to speak to him again. I'm going to make him so miserable because I'm going to ignore him forever until he grovels at my feet. We get home. It's like 7 o'clock. It's light out. I put on my pajamas. I get in bed and I'm just all like, my face is all scrunched up. My arms are crossed. He went upstairs to watch TV with this kid. He doesn't even know anything's wrong. And I kind of got a glance. I glanced myself in the mirror and I saw myself. I looked ridiculous. And so I was like, oh, yeah, I need to talk to my inner child. I said, Tammi, how are you? Little Tammi, how are you? And she goes, I'm mad. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. Yeah. So, and then questions even to your inner child. She goes, well, I wanted to see that movie. And Steve made me mad because he didn't want to see it. And I said, you know what? I have car keys and I have money and we don't need him. We can go. She was like, really? So we went to the movies. I came home around 10:30 at night. Steve was like, where'd you go? I said, you know what? It's not your responsibility to take care of my inner child. It's mine.
That's so powerful. The day you realize, we always say, he makes me so mad, she makes me so angry, he makes me jealous, she makes me jealous. The reality is you are a grown person and no one makes you feel anything ever. You choose to feel a way in response to stimulus they give you. No one makes you mad. You choose to get mad. No one makes you sad. You choose to get sad. And when you grow up and become a big girl or a big boy and realize that, and what a great technique to have conversations with your inner child, you realize no one makes you anything. You decide to do it. And it's responsibility, yes, but it's also very freeing when you do it. Tell us about your books before we run out of time, and where people can get information about you, please.
Thank you, Jeffrey. My first book is called Manifesting Love from the Inside Out. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to my website. If you order it from me, I'll send you a bookmark and a card, and I can autograph it for you, give you a couple of extra gifts. My second book is called Manifesting Prosperity.
Now, is that one the #1 Amazon bestseller?
Yes, yes. So Manifesting Prosperity from the Inside Out, which to me, prosperity is money, but that's not the whole picture. Prosperity is fulfilling relationships. It's having a healthy body. It's doing what you love and being well compensated. It's dancing in your own light. It's having that connection with the divine. And I believe everything we want comes from that. Everything that we deserve comes from that connection to something greater. So whether it's love or money, prosperity, career, you can get both the books. You can have it all. I believe we can have it all if we believe we deserve it. And so they're not just books, they're guides. Each chapter has exercises at the end. There's also guided meditations. And if people go to my website, they can get my free ebook called The Path to Prosperity for free. And it
what's your website?
Oh, thank you. TammiBPhD.com. And that's spelled with an I, Tammi, B as in boy, PhD.com. You can just sign up for that and get that free ebook. On page 16 is a guided meditation you can start listening to start help reprogramming your subconscious mind for that sense of innate value, original blessing, and worthiness. And when we start deeply believing that, when our subconscious mind really believes that, it's going to happen. Miracles are essentially guaranteed because we manifest what our subconscious mind believes we deserve. So once we get that on board with the program, the sky's the limit.
Right. Going back even to some, well, we would call older wisdom, a fellow named Napoleon Hill said, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve.
Absolutely.
And that is so, so true. So, Tammi, are you telling me that there is an actual step-by-step formula that a person can apply and devote themselves to, that if done consistently and with full intention can lead to prosperity?
I have seen it happen repeatedly. It's my story. It's the story of clients that I've worked with. I get incredible emails from people all over the world that have put these practices into practice in their own lives, and the miracles that manifest because of them. And I'm so honored. And what I'm saying isn't necessarily something new or different. As you had said, there's Napoleon Hill. There's wonderful teachers out there. And I talk a lot about the teachings of Christ. He's the one that started this whole thing. Well, maybe he didn't start it, but he's such a wonderful teacher about the principles of prosperity. The kingdom of heaven is within.
Absolutely.
There is no out there. As we cultivate that relationship with our inner reality, our outer reality is a mirror and will reflect that back to us. So
Absolutely.
My intention with the work I do and exercises is to point people inward, much like, that's what Jesus did.
Exactly.
And once you do this, once you remove the subconscious beliefs that you're not worthy, that you're not powerful, once your subconscious mind relaxes and believes these truths, then things can start to show up with God winks, grace, miracles, ease. I also offer a lot of guided meditations on my website to, again, cultivate that relationship with the subconscious mind and heal up any of those beliefs that you don't deserve your heart's desires, that you're not worthy, because in truth, you are precious. You are perfect. You are in process. And once you really can relax into that knowingness, the universe, the world, life can show up in ways that is so exquisite and supportive. You become a partner in this relationship with God on earth as a human being, a spiritual being, having a human experience. And it can be so joyful and celebratory, but we need to know that we deserve this. And that's my intention with the books, to show people, to guide people.
Now, one person that has found your books to be profoundly impactful on them is rather popular in these parts, and that's Tammi and Gina, who actually introduced the two of us. She said that she found your books to be very powerful for her and a time in her life where she needed it. Yeah,
and I don't even know how she came across it. She said her pediatrician recommended it, and I don't know how people find them sometimes. I'm just grateful. Again, my intention when I wrote them is just to connect with people can benefit from my way of speaking and teaching. And she was one of them. And I adore her with my whole heart. She's definitely part of my tribe. And I'm honored that it supported her. But she seems to be flying now. She's doing fantastic
Oh,
stuff.
she absolutely is. Now, if someone's only going to remember one thing from this time that we spent together, from what you spoke to, the folks that are here and the folks that'll hear this in the days, weeks, and months, and even years to come, what would you want people to walk away from listening to you tonight? What would you want them to walk away with that they can grab onto and hold on to?
I would just say, give yourself permission to relax. Creating from stress and anxiety, creating from fear, it's not going to manifest a result that's sustainable. Relax. Just trust that you're worthy. Trust that you're loved. Trust that you're supported. Relax into that space and start to identify more with the essence of your beingness being a precious and profound jewel. And if you need some time to heal up, give yourself permission. Take a nap when you're tired, to be gentle with yourself, because life and others treat us the way we treat ourselves. So consider what you want and how you want to be treated, and treat yourself that way. Be kind with you. Be compassionate with you. You've been through a lot. Being human is no joke. This is a tough gig, and I think there's billions of angels that say, "No way, I'm not putting on that skin suit."
Right. And I'm reminded of the words of the Christ, Tammi, where he said, "My peace I leave with you." And it's not peace like the world gives, but it's peace that passes all understanding. And he gave us some very simple ways and truths to follow that he says leads to life, and life more abundant. And what is more like relaxing into yourself than living in a peace that passes all understanding? I think what you said beautifully echoed the words of the Christ. I think so much of what you've said and written does, and I think that's probably a reason why it's been so profoundly effective in many people's lives.
Well, thank you, Jeff. He's my teacher.
And it's been a joy to have you, Dr. Tammi. I appreciate you being with us. Give us your website one more time, please, and spell it out if you would, so people can make sure they get it.
Thank you, Jeff. Tammi B, PhD, Tammi B as in boy, PhD.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. I love to connect.
So it's T-A, 2 M's and an I, not a Y.
Correct.
Then PhD.
Tammi B, Tammi, B as in boy, PhD.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Tammi. I appreciate you being here. I hope that we can speak to you again. And I really, really do appreciate you being here. I appreciate all of our viewers here. And I just ask you to remember that you don't have original sin within, but you've got the spark of divinity. So love yourself, love your neighbor. Let's be excellent to each other. Let's make the change we want to see. And above all else, let's stay fearless, my friends. For Dr. Tammi, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, your friendly neighborhood Christian whistleblower, saying good night, and I salute those of you that are here seeking after truth.
God bless you.